to the Mental Health Mukbang, where we make mental health easily digestible. My name is Jeanie Wang, and I'm a clinical psychologist from Houston, Texas. And today I have grilled pork banh mi from Roostar here in Houston.
Wow. Cool. I guess I'll go next. I'm Jeanie Chang, an LMFT in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm eating this Mandarin orange chicken from Trader Joe's. It doesn't look appetizing right now, with Korean rice and sriracha because I like things spicy. And I had no vegetables. That's what I'm eating.
There's nothing wrong with just carbs and meat. It's always a good combination.
And I'm Christopher Vell. I'm in LMFT based out of Houston, Texas as well. Today I've just got something healthy, just nuts and dried berries. This COVID stuff has definitely had me put on some pounds, so I'm trying to be healthy today.
Dude, okay. My name is Chun. I am a therapist based out of Los Angeles, California. And unlike everybody else who's trying to be like okay-ish, I have sausage egg McMuffin and hash browns. So
Nice.
who cares, you know? Self-care, we're gonna do what we need to do to feel okay, you know? And
That's right.
That's what we're talking about today. Talking about self-care, and sometimes you just need a sausage egg McMuffin to get you going in the morning. So that's where we're at in this COVID season.
And McDonald's fries. Now you're making me realize, I have not had McDonald's fries in a while.
Our fries are so good.
Uh-huh.
You want to know a life hack? If you ever make spam musubis, a McDonald's hash brown is the same size as a musubi, so you can replace the rice.
Is it?
You really hate your body.
Is it?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. So self-care. I'll start off with a question for you guys. How would we explain self-care? What is self-care?
For me, self-care has to be a conscientious decision. Like, you have to set time and space for it. And it has to be something that you do that impacts you positively, right? And I think people get confused sometimes with the definition of self-care because it's too often, they only look at it as like getaway activities, right? But self-care can encompass a lot more than that.
And I think the marketing capitalism world has kind of co-opted it to be this like marketing tool to buy these bath soaps or whatever and get massages and get your nails done. And those certainly can be examples of self-care for people.
Sure.
But then so are really unsexy things like meal planning and not taking on too many patients because you're overloaded and you're tired, right? And things that protect your energy, or even preparing yourself, right, for the week and all that's coming. And so you decide not to go out and see people, you know?
Yeah.
So I think self-care for me sometimes is more like with boundaries we just talked about, right? Is having those healthy boundaries so that I can actually show up the way I want to.
I love that.
Yeah. I think contrary to what I'm doing right now and feeding myself crap, it doesn't have to be like something that is, I guess if I were to like present self-care to my client, right? From a psychoeducational point of view, self-care is more so, like Chris said, it's like a mindful, conscious decision to do something that is going to make you feel or make you more prepared, as Jenny said, to handle the things that life is going to throw at you. Like the things that you know that life is going to, or to make sense of the things that life has thrown at you, right? And for a lot of people, I think, especially like Jenny said, like nowadays self-care is all these like, you got to go do something, you got to go like travel the world, you got to go like hiking, you got to go buy bath soaps, you got to go like do all these things, buy all these things to take care of yourself, you have to download this app and whatever and like do whatever, you know, honestly, self-care sometimes looks like taking a nap in the middle of the day because you just need energy to function. And
Yeah.
like it doesn't have to be the super complicated, super like capitalistic, super like consumer driven thing. It literally is taking care of yourself by finding your mental health. And
Mm.
that looks different for everybody.
Yeah.
So
I like that.
To piggyback on that, I think the way that a lot of people define self-care in their head is a guilty pleasure, right?
Mm.
And something that you normally wouldn't do, which is why so often it's tied to the something capitalistic, or skirting your responsibilities or something like that, right? If you feel guilty about it in that manner, it's probably not great self-care, right? Because that guilt is going to take away from the enjoyment in the first place. And self-care also sometimes means that you still have to keep in mind your end goal, right? Self-care doesn't mean putting yourself in debt in order to enjoy something very temporarily and then, deal with the repercussions later. That's not what that necessarily means. Just like you guys have said, budgeting can be self-care. Going to the doctor and getting a physical can be self-care. Exercise can be self-care. Taking a nap can be self-care. Don't let anyone else define what self-care is for you, but really think about what it is that you need right now.
I was about to take a bite and explain something. So maybe I'll wait to take a bite. I was going to say, yeah, I like to say to people, self-care is living your life on a daily basis the way you want, so you don't feel like you need to like escape your life, because your life is going to be there. Things are always, change happens, work is always there. So don't plan these. Great vacations, a great part of self-care. That's actually very much needed. But I find a lot of people going, if only I did this, or I'm going to go on vacation and I feel like that'll take me away. But I'm like, hey, vacation's just supposed to enhance your life. Why not make it like every day what you do, not feel like a vacation, but do something or something purposeful or whatever that is, a habit, something that you're going to really instill, that vacation just adds value, but it's not about the only value. Because I see that with a lot of professionals. And I don't know about you guys, but you guys who work with parents, I've had parents say to me very irritatingly, I don't have time for self-care. So that's why I feel like it's also misunderstood, a little bit. I'm like, let me explain. Self-care, I like to say, is also family care. It's the word self is in there. So I think that's the misconception.
Yeah.
I go, it's not about you going and saying, kids, you're on your own. I'm going to go upstairs and watch Netflix. It can look like that, but it's not that. It's not only that. So I do advocate it for a lot with specifically with parents who will say things like that, right? And
Sure.
I go, hey, self-care is even quality time with your kids. So you're not as irritated with them. Maybe you're not connecting with them. So sit down for 30 minutes, just ask your son about Fortnite, which I'll do occasionally, right?
Yeah.
To connect. And that could be great self-care for you, because all of a sudden you just develop this connection with your son that maybe, or daughter who also plays Fortnite, that you didn't have because you were fighting all week. So that's my example to a lot of parents. But yeah, I'll hear that from a lot of parents. They get irritated. I'm like, okay, that's not what I mean. Calm down. I don't know if you guys have interacted with that, but.
Yeah, I mean, in the same vein, I work with mostly couples, so self-care can look either way, right? Sometimes if a couple's enmeshed, it can mean taking some time away from the relationship, doing something independent. But also sometimes it's recognizing in the relationship and creating that date night to take care of the relationship, right? And I tell my couples, because I hear that same sentence all the time of, we don't have time for date night, right? Because we're doing all these different things. Again, don't let anyone else dictate and define what date night looks to you, right? We have these visions of it has to be a hotel or a vacation or a fancy dinner or any of these things. It can be a 5-minute, massage. It can be a 10-minute bath together. It can be all these different things. But what is it that lets you disconnect and, be mindful and add balance to your life?
Let's
I love
talk
going
about
to Costco. Oh, sorry.
You go to Costco.
Oh, that's my date one. I'm like, honey,
I
please
love
go
it.
to Costco.
That's awesome. I want to pose a question to y'all. How do you think our Asian culture interfaces with how we feel about the idea of self-care. Because I think Jeannie brings up a good point in that a lot of the clients I work with are moms, and so they feel guilt, right, for putting themselves first for a little bit. And so how do you think our culture may inform how we make that happen or don't make that happen?
You'll have time when you're retired.
or I think as my parents have, I've seen, if I see it manifest in my parents, I feel like their attention is all on the kids, right? That typical immigrant family, all attention, not even on the marriage, you know. So I've seen some discord and you see a lot of things going on there. And then you see it all on the kids, which is why I also felt maybe pressure, because it's all about us and not about the parents. So I don't think self-care is really a term that I was just trying to think of the Korean term, or I don't know if you can even interpret it in Korean. They don't, there's no word as self-care. You know, I think it's maybe care for kids, or look at the elder care. So because of that, I think our parents don't know that concept. And I see that even now when my mom doesn't even know how to rest. I'm like, you're coming to visit the kids, but I'll actually be a little bit frustrated because she's so busy cooking that I'm like, the kids are hanging out in the family room. And she's like, I know, but I'm going to give you 50 frozen foods. And I'm like, okay, but self-care to me is also her always missing the kids. So she ends up being this pattern of, I miss the kids, I don't see them. And I'm like, because you're not even, you know, you're not able to be present and engaged. So I just know that it's like me trying to tell her, just sit and I'll do it, even though I can't really do all the stuff that she does in the kitchen. But yeah, something like, obviously it's foreign to them. That's my understanding.
Yeah. I just had a discussion about this last night about the parallels of like the Protestant ideals and Asian culture of productivity is how you gain worth, right? And so many parents, Asian parents, I've heard say, you know, you'll have time to have fun after you've graduated school, and then you've gotten a job, and then you've gotten kids, and then you've retired, and then you don't have time to enjoy any of those things anymore, right? But I see a lot of that first generation just hoard wealth and not really spend it, right? I know some who don't have kids, so where does it go at that point, right? What is the purpose of hoarding it at that point? But that's where they get all their self-worth from. So like you said, they don't understand the concept of, you know, consistent and constant self-care.
Once again, I will be the contrarian.
Go for it.
I actually feel like the way that, I think for us, right, the way that we experience self-care versus the way that we observe what that looks like, or the lack thereof in our parents or like the previous generation of immigrants, right, is a little flawed in that once again, it's one of those cultural things that doesn't translate over very well, right? And I think when it comes down to it, I think that there are aspects to self-care that the way that we see self-care, right, versus the way that they might see it can be kind of different. Like, let's take Jeannie's example, right, of how her mom wants to be involved all the time, right? If her anxiety comes from not knowing or being uncertain, right, going out of her way to feel better might look like buying all these frozen foods, being there, being present, like asking questions about what they ate for dinner the night before, right? That helps her to feel like she's involved and that she cares, and that in that way she resolves that dissonance that she's feeling. And for her, that might be self-care. I might just be reading into it too much, but that is a possibility, right? If we want to make self-care this broad term, this encompassing term that means resolving and dealing with some of our emotional struggle. And I know for a fact that for my parents, like when I was growing up, like calling me whenever I was out too late was taking care of their, like, for them, you could just pretend that I don't exist, right? It's like, he's gone, he's out there, whatever, right? But for them, making sure that I'm alive was taking care of themselves, because otherwise they'd be up all night just freaking out, right? Like, where the heck is he going? What is he doing? Whatever. But having that knowledge helps them to feel like they can rest. And so if I'm out, then like, I think I remember my mom sharing with me before, it's just like, yeah, like sometimes I stay up until you get home because I feel anxious until you like are physically back in the house, when I was younger. And I was like, okay, right? That makes sense now. Back then I was just like, why? Just go to sleep. Like, it doesn't matter, right? And that's one of those differences where like the value and the worth for them comes from my safety and existence. And so taking care of themselves meant making sure that I was okay. Otherwise, they would be in a mental place that's just woo. But that's an alternative interpretation of what self-care might look like.
I mean,
I
I'm
would
not
say
going to
that
disagree.
taking care of their anxiety, but I also think that's very enmeshed, right? I don't think that's necessarily a healthy view of self-care. I think that's how they would view it, sure, but ideally I don't think that's what I would ever prescribe to someone.
Well, I mean, I think Jed's thinking. I'm assuming, Jed, you're thinking that it makes them happy when they know you're safe. So that's their self care. But I was going to say, self care is also about your own worth and finding your own value. So sorry, Mom, if you're watching this, why I see that as that pattern of unhealthy boundaries is when she feels like her worth is embedded in making us food. When honestly, my kids don't even half of it. If she just brought home McDonald's, Egg McMuffins, and hash browns, and then sat with them and watched the latest Netflix series that they're watching, I think that would make them very happy. Of course, that's making them happy, but self-care, I think for her is when she complains to me. I don't see them. Can I talk to them? Can I FaceTime? And I'm like, geez, you were just here for 3 weeks. So that's what I'm talking about. Just her value or her own self-worth just is so tied to doing for others. I think, like I said, I hear what you're saying, but I want to see her getting that fed to feel like she doesn't need to prove that and she's present with the kids. Hopefully I'm making sense, but I'm saying I understand your point, but I also want her to find her own value, and what, impactful value for yourself.
Speaking of enmeshment, I think Jenny posted something to Instagram the other day regarding enmeshment and what that looks like culturally.
Yes.
In Western psychology.
Yes. And I think that's important to point out, is that the post was a commentary on how it is unfair to use that term for Asians when culturally there are all these nuances that exist within Asian culture in which you may think it's enmeshment from the outside looking in, but I may not, right? If my parents come and my dad comes and fixes my fence because it's about to collapse and the hurricane is coming, some people would say, what the heck? Why are you having your dad do that? That's like, you're so enmeshed, right? You can't do that for yourself and hire somebody. But culturally and within our family dynamic, that is how he expresses love. And so that, to me, and how I perceive it, is not enmeshment. So yeah, that is kind of the framework I was trying to kind of push, is this idea that Western individualism is not the benchmark by which enmeshment is defined. We don't all have to look like this independent, isolated, autonomous person. And that doesn't mean that is the only definition of health. So anyways, that's what
Jed was pointing out, right? So let's get personal. How do you engage in self-care? What's important to you guys? What do you guys do on a daily basis? Let's share. Starting with whoever.
Okay, I guess since this has been something that I've actually been thinking about recently, like, as therapists, I think so often people look at us and like they're the bastion of hope and self and what is it? They are the representative of everything that we strive to be because they have all of their stuff together, right? And I guess, well, okay, it depends on what kind of therapist you are, but for the most part, that's what people look to us as, right? There's people who are going to help me try to figure things out because they have it figured out. And there are times where, even for me personally, like I am not completely aware of what's going on. And sometimes you have to really take a step back and be mindful of what you're feeling and what's going on in order to kind of take care of yourself and to recognize that you need to take care of yourself. So for me, recently, I was doing some self-reflection and I realized I was getting like super restless. Um, as somebody who's fairly extroverted and really needs the energy of other people to function at times, I think I was getting by okay during quarantine for the most part, but I started to feel this kind of like restlessness, and I felt just like I needed to go and like do something, but I also felt really tired and really drained because I just am not getting the amount of human interaction that is necessary for me to function. And so for me, what self-care looks like might be very different from someone else, right? For other people, we talk about escaping, we talk about um trying to find time for yourself and whatever. For me, I realized like, hey, for self-care, I need to be engaged with people. Like I just need to be interacting with people, right? And so given that we're in a quarantine and we don't have a whole lot of options in terms of hanging out with people, I look to the internet, right? And so recently I took to a platform called Twitch, and it's a place where most people will know it for like live streaming people who play games, right? Um, and so I found it super interesting, as like kind of like a social observation to realize that there are these microcosms of communities built around these individual people, and not just like really famous people, right? But even just like people that are like people who are just on the internet streaming games or whatever it is that they're doing and just engaging with people. I thought that was super interesting that you could find self-care in watching other people play games and interacting with them. Um, and for me, it's super helpful because I need that energy from people, and these people have that energy to give, right? Whether depending on whether they're expressive or whatever, and the fact that they're interacting with you is actually like, yeah, it feels like, hey, like I feel at least moderately connected with some of these people. Um, so for me, that is how I have been taking care of myself. It's interacting with strangers on the internet and playing games with my friends, because I that's kind of my baseline for functioning now
Yeah,
that,
you're an extrovert. You need
yeah,
that.
now that I can't go and physically hang out with people, this is what I've come to recognize, is that for me self-care looks like agent and connection. Whereas other people are like, nah, dude, I'm gonna sit home and read a book because I can't. So anyway,
Jenny and
that's
Chris,
that's my personal
introverts.
personal sharing for this time.
No, that's good.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I represent the total opposite of you, as you could probably suspect. Um, where, and part of it is I have young children, so I don't really get any alone time unless I'm working. And so my self-care is very much, withdrawing, reading books, journaling, running. And really, when I think about self-care for myself, I define it as, is it life-giving or is it life-draining? So if the behavior is something where I come out of it feeling refreshed, like I used to bust out of here and go to Target and just walk around for an hour by myself, right? Before COVID. And that was like my self-care. I would buy nothing or bananas, but it was just something where I could not have any responsibilities, not have to answer to little children or tyrants, and like have that time for myself. And so for me, I have to exercise, I have to sleep well. Those are things that are like non-negotiable self-care. And then connection too, though. I've noticed for me, like not being able to see friends or family regularly has taken a toll as well, even though I am introverted. But yeah, so I always come back to like, do I feel like I have more to give after the activity, or do I have less? And that's how I know it's self-care.
You just gave me a visual of like a meter, like Jenny's meter goes up, or goes down. We should draw that. So I'm an extrovert like Jed. So I like to connect too, but I'm also a mom. So I also relate to Jenny because sometimes I'm just like, oh my gosh, I need to leave my house. My favorite part, this is my self-care. And actually it does make me more tired, but I have to wake up super early. The calm before even sunrise, because I'm a morning person, I actually can be pretty alert at like 4 to 4:30 in the morning. Hence my morning talks with Jed, like he's on Pacific time, right? And so I am pretty alert and I do some of my best thinking and some of my best work because kids are sleeping. And I feel like if I don't have that, then I start the day in a rush, already a little irritated because kids are back in school now. Well, virtual school. So just for me to give more, like Jenny said, I do need to have that time in the morning. But then again, I can interact with all y'all all day long. But the morning has to start that way. And then I also have to do my morning walk, jog. I half jog now because I don't know, something's wrong with my knee, age, whatever. But I'm like, okay, let me just fast walk. But I also need that too. And I get my best ideas, when you're listening and all of a sudden you're like, I got to go home and do all this stuff. But that's great. So I do need my alone time, as extroverted as I am, or I can't give to other people. Oh, I have to say one more thing. You know how else I take care of myself, as extroverted as I am? Because I can get caught up in this. I limit social media. Now, when I get on it, I'll get on it.
Yeah.
But I have to, because I'm so extroverted, the FOMO I feel on going everybody's page and going, oh, they're in Montana. Oh, let me comment on this. Let me like, let me love, the caring emojis.
Yeah.
I'll go through every emoji and then realize I didn't respond to somebody. I'm one of those that likes to respond or do something. That's too much for me. That just gets me stressed out. So as Jenny said, my stress factor goes up if I'm on social media. Time to get off. So yes, as an extrovert, I need to get off social media or limit it. Sorry.
I'm, what's the term? Ambivert? Is that the term? Where normally I am introverted, but people don't know that. People think I'm an extrovert because of how I, just show myself out in public. But I only do that in very short bursts, right? After that, even when I go on vacation with friends and things like that, I need to have my own room, and one day I'm just gonna lock myself up and just leave me alone, right? But for me, self-care is about balance. Sometimes, like I talked about earlier, it is, budgeting, planning my day, outlining things. So I am not stressed when push comes to shove. Sometimes it's exercise. And a lot of times it's tied to like escapism. I'm very, this is a job that can overtake your life if you're not careful with your boundaries. And I give a lot to my clients, to my jobs, things like that. So if it takes me out completely, right? So things like fishing is a big thing that I do nowadays. Just clears my mind completely. I'm not thinking about anything else at all. And that helps a lot.
I like fishing too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Someday we will fish together.
Yeah, definitely. I've been wandering around a lot. The big problem now is that just recently, this year, my body has become allergic to my own sweat. So I get heat rash. So I just deal with it at this point. It's whatever.
All right.
Pros and cons, right?
So what you're saying is that in order for us to take care of ourselves, we should all hop on a boat, go to Baja, and go fishing, right?
Yeah.
Because that sounds pretty good to me too. We can record an episode while we're on the boat and waiting to catch some fish.
Well, we should do it. No,
It's so cheap right now. I saw what is it? I saw a vacation package. It was like
it's cheap.
5 or 6 days, including flight, all inclusive to Cabo for like $500 or $600.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
But
Crazy.
do you want to be in Mexico in COVID? I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
How about with relationships? self-care? Like, you know how I have to ask, because sometimes we're all relational, but I meant, do you feel like you've had to put some boundaries on for your own self-care in limiting some of the toxicity of relationships, right? There's some unhealthy interactions. I share this because in recent months, I've had to do that, right? From things that, and you know what? And the person was not toxic. It meant what happened was it was sucking me in. Someone needed my attention more, and I felt bad, that whole, "Oh, okay, let me be there, fellow mom, I understand." After a while, I wasn't giving to my own family, and then I would just be like literally like a lump on the couch. So how do you maintain your own self-care when it comes to people that expect so much of you? I guess we're kind of talking about this too. This is a different angle of self-care, right? In reference to people, how much do you give? Do you have a limit? Like, oh, it's 6 o'clock, I'm not talking to anybody. No, I'm just, curious.
I think it's the same concept, right? Being flexible with your boundaries at some points and firm when you know you need to be, right? For some people, it is that. For some people with very intensive jobs, it is turning off the phone, like the work phone, at a certain hour, no longer looking at their emails and things like that. Because I do see people get caught up in that, answering their emails and responding at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? Stop doing that. The work will always be there, right? With friendships, same thing too. It doesn't mean that I don't love you or care about you, but I do have to draw boundaries. I do have some friends who I don't think purposefully do so, but may overstep sometimes. And I just have to remain clear with them. Like, these are my personal boundaries, right? I'm one of those people, especially that, like, I hate when people call me. I just don't like to talk on the phone, because especially during these times, during therapy, I'm always doing telehealth, right? So I just want to disconnect. If you need something, text, so I can reply to you on my terms, right? I still have some friends who, no matter what I do, will constantly call me, right? And I'll pick up the phone and say, "Hey, are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. I just wanted to." "Okay, I'm text. Bye." Click.
Note to self: do not call Chris.
Yeah. Well,
Good.
Jeanie, you bring up a good point in, like, how do you know that you need to engage in self-care? Like, what are red flags that come up for y'all that kind of say, whoa, like, you're hitting the red zone, right? And you need to start kind of refueling yourself again. Because we all have that, right? We all have seasons where situations don't allow us to do it consistently, or maybe we get injured, we can't exercise, and so it takes away one form of self-care. So how do y'all know you're hitting that point? And then what do you then do, right, at that point when you are hitting that threshold?
Great question. You start. I know you asked the question.
I mean, I think for me, it's like irritability. The moment I start getting really irritable at things that normally don't bother me, or I'm just less patient, I'm like, whoa, something different. Especially with my kids, if I like, stop bothering me, stop talking to me, and so irritability, I think for sure is one of the red flags for me. And anger too. Like, I don't know if y'all do Enneagrams, but I'm like a type 1 Enneagram. And I didn't know that I was a type 1 until they said that your primary kind of like reaction is anger. And I was like, oh, that's me. Like, I spend a lot of time angry if I'm feeling out of balance. And so that often is a sign for me too. Irritability, anger, really similar.
Yeah. So clarify, what's number 1, the Enneagram?
The Enneagram 1 is the like reformer, or like the good person. So if you imagine being more maybe type A and perfectionistic, I'm really trying to work on those things.
I think that's my second one. You know how we have like, I'm 3.
Okay.
Surprise, surprise. Yeah, let's say note to self: don't make Jenny mad. Okay. Don't call Chris and don't make Jenny mad. So we can help each other with our self-care. I think I'm similar, but mine is actually, you might think it's funny, but mine is actually related to any behavior that I see as unhealthy to my husband. Like, if things come, like, actually when I'm good and I have healthy boundaries and engaging in good self-care and taking care of myself, I find that I'm just a better wife first to my husband. For some reason, it's everything unleashed on my own husband. Sorry, people are like, oh, Jeanie, not going to be married to Jeanie. But, and I find myself irritated with, even if he was like breathing, I'm like, whoa, or snapping and just not wanting to engage. And so then, and that's very obvious to me, because then there's tension. And of course, being a family therapist, if there's tension between the parents, what do you think happens with the whole family? So mine's not so much directed at the kids. It tends to be directed to my husband. Then I'm like, okay, and mine usually has to do with, I struggle. And by the way, we should all share what's our biggest struggle with self-care. My main thing is, because I'm so extroverted, like Jed, I'll tend to give a little bit more to people, being the therapist friend. We should talk about that too, right? People are like, I have a question, Jeanie, can we talk? And of course I'd be like, sure. Can I talk at 10? That's when the kids go down. I'm like, sure. So 10 p.m., right? Then I give a little too much and not think about my own family and myself, and then things go downhill, right? And then I have nothing left to give. So mine would be that. What I do, how I say things to my husband, it's almost like a mirror image. I'm like, oh, let me watch that. Yeah, irritability. I'm not so much angry as in more irritable. Not like I don't get angry, but I have a short temper. So I'll unleash and be fine in like 5 minutes.
What about you guys?
Mine. How about the boys? Men, sorry.
I think that's a really good measure, is your emotions, right? That's an exercise that I do a lot with my clients, where I take a situation and I say, I scale it on a 1 to 10 in a vacuum. How much irritability, disrespect, anxiety should you be feeling about this specific event in a vacuum? How much are you actually feeling, right? So that difference that you're feeling could be either a lack of energy, lack of self-care, or a concept that I call the ghosts of the past, where past resentments and things are coming up for you. And just seeing how that really affects your day, right? Because there have definitely been times, like, I'm an ex-smoker, and I've been on and off, and every time I quit, there was that period of like 3 weeks into it where I would just snap at something that didn't make any sense. And my friends would be like, are you quitting smoking? I was like, yeah. But yeah, that's typically how I know about those things. But also, I've mentioned it before, I honestly have immunodisorders. So my body tells me when I am not practicing self-care. And because of that, that's where I struggle with self-care sometimes, because I feel like I get frustrated that my body needs a little bit more relaxation than most people, right? To kind of decompress. And then I feel guilty about it because I need to be doing all these other things. And, if I try to push it, my body just punishes me. It's just something I have to reconcile. I just have to accept that that's just what I have to do sometimes. And I have to make better use of my time.
I think for me also, irritability is one of the factors. The lower my tolerance for generally means that probably not. And that just usually means reacting, like Chris said, like reacting more strongly to something that normally would not cause me to. Because I already have a pretty pretty high threshold for things to actually bother me. So most of the time, like people will like be like, "Oh, like why did that not bother you?" Like, I don't know, it just doesn't. And so when things start to bother me, that's usually one of the key something is if I start to get irritable, or the biggest one for me is when I start to disconnect with people. That's when like something is seriously up, because that's normally how I want to kind of go about life, right? Being connected, and that's something that's important to me. So when I start to distance myself, or when I start to be unresponsive, or when I start to just not engage, that's usually a good sign that um something is up with my, like, I guess, mental state, or even for me, like just self-care in general. Something is missing when Jed is irritable. Whatever reason. And I mean, like Jeannie, as extroverted as I am, as much as I need energy from other people, like there are times where I need to just recluse and just not engage with anybody so I can actually be alone with my thoughts, just so I can get things sorted again. And that's usually how I know that something is.
I'm like, wow, Jed gets irritated.
I know, right? It does happen. It does happen.
Cool. So I think we covered self-care. Do you think we covered self-care comprehensively, folks?
Yeah.
So obviously something to be very mindful and intentional, and something that I feel like, and one of the questions I like to ask clients, and we don't have to answer this, but is like, what's one thing you do each day that matters to you? Which means I feel like think about it and be very purposeful, because we could go through a whole day and just be not mindful at all, doing the motions, autopilot. So
Yeah.
maybe we talk about mindfulness next. But yeah, self-care, very important, especially during this time.
Yeah. And remember, no one can define self-care for you, right? It can be short, it can be huge, it can be medium, right? But like you said, mindfulness is something that I prescribe to my clients. It can be a 5-minute YouTube meditation, and that's your self-care for the day.
Yeah, I tell people it's not fancy, so don't think it's like this glamorous thing. Just like you said about date nights, I love that example. It could be simply you and your husband doing a puzzle.
Yeah.
But you're in connecting. We don't do puzzles, but I'm just giving examples, Yeah, so it doesn't have to be fancy, but so we're all going to go on a fishing trip together in the future. The minute COVID lets up next summer.
Next week.
Next week would be nice, but I want to fish for trout. That was one of the things I've always wanted to do. So I guess we have to go to the lake. Trout, I don't know.
Yeah.
Trout and flounder.
I think trout.
But
You
okay,
need
well,
to.
that wraps it up. Huh?
Never mind. I'm not a fishing expert.
Me neither. And by the way, I don't put the fish on the hooks. That will have to be Chris. I will hold the rod. So that said, that wraps it up. Thanks for watching this episode on self-care, and we'll see you next week.
Yep. See y'all next week.
Hopefully, we made this digestible for you.
Still digesting. Not done yet.